Hear testimony today by Thobani Mnyandu of M.N.S attorneys when proceedings resume at 10 o'clock in Parktown today. Yesterday, Tiamo Sedumedi of M.N.S attorneys said former Transnet Group CEO Brian Molefe wrongfully requested the Transnet board to approve a 2.7 billion rand provision for batch pricing in the acquisition of 1,064 locomotives. He said that the 16 billion rand increase in the estimated total cost of the locomotives was irregularly approved. He said that the memorandum presented by Molefe to the board should have been referred to the minister because it exceeded the 3.9 billion rand approval threshold. Let's get more on this story now. Mbali Mtetwa joins us now live. She's been covering the story very carefully. Mbali, thank you very much indeed for your time. Let's just start off with regards to what came out yesterday, some of the salient points that came out from the M.N.S attorneys.
Well, M.N.S attorneys is basically saying that the increment was irregular. And it's irregular because the original amount of 38.6 billion rand was approved by the minister, which is the minister of from the Department of Public Enterprises. And because the ministry forms part of SOE's shareholding, so they have to approve most of the transactions that happen at SOE. And basically, Sedumedi is telling the commission that if the original amount of 38.6 billion rand had to be approved by the ministry, and this is stipulated in the PFMA, then the increment should have also gone through the ministry. And he's basically saying that in a memorandum that Brian Molefe sent through to the board, he misled the board by informing them that he had the authority to approve this increase and that they didn't have to go through the ministry. And then we know that he then approved this amount, and he says it was unlawful and rather irregular. Now, the question behind, I think that everyone wants to know is, why would someone act unlawfully? I mean, what do they stand to gain or anything like that? We hear that the one company that so let me take it back like this. Let me explain it in this manner. So we know about the 1,064 locomotives that are being acquired, and they are being acquired from 4 different companies: Bombardier, General Electrics, China South Rail, and China North Rail. Now, China South Rail is the company that everyone has testified to having a special relationship with Transnet. And a special relationship with Brian Molefe in particular. So it's almost as though he's acting in the interest of China South Rail. And we hear from the commission that China South Rail had a Gupta link. We heard Tiamo Sedumedi presenting to the commission a memorandum, not really a memorandum, but an agreement between China South Rail and a company called Tequestra. Now, the company called Tequestra is linked to Baddock chairperson Iqbal Sharma, who is an employee of Transnet, and it's also directed by a Gupta business associate, someone we've come to know as a Gupta business associate, that is Salim Issa. And we hear that they had an arrangement that China South Rail would give them 21% of their revenue that they would be getting from the Transnet deal. And it's almost as though they are saying that Tequestra is the one that facilitated the deal, and that they wouldn't have gotten the deal had it not been for Tequestra. But there is no proof or evidence that proves that there's any work that's been done by Tequestra in any way. And obviously this creates a conflict of interest on behalf of Iqbal Sharma, because he forms part of the procurement committee that sits and basically evaluates all the tenders during the period when Transnet was acquiring the 1064 locomotives.
So M.N.S attorneys were mandated to conduct these reports and investigations. What sort of processes did they follow? We heard Tiamo explaining that they had to get a number of people, a number of experts, because they are lawyers and they needed different people who understood, the finances, the financials, and so on. So they've got actuarial scientists. They worked with actuarial scientists in order to actually investigate these transactions and to come to the conclusions that they came to. We also heard the testimony from one of the actuarial scientists that they worked with, whose name is Alice
Minister Chabi, my apologies. And he is basically due to come back to the commission because the judge felt that his testimony was a bit too technical.
He recorded an affidavit, yeah?
Yes, he recorded an affidavit. So he's due to come back at another time. But we're also going to be continue from hearing from M.N.S, people who were intimately involved in this investigation, who are going to tell us more details. But at the heart of the Transnet leg at the state capture inquiry is this acquisition of 1,064 locomotives. There are others. There is the acquisition of 95 locomotives, and there is another acquisition of 100 locomotives where costs also escalated for no apparent reason, which were also approved by Brian Molefe. And it also seems as though some of those companies had a relationship with, they had some Gupta ties to them. And
so from what I heard towards the end of yesterday's session is that the person that's coming in today, I think they're also from M.N.S, if I'm not mistaken. So the testimony won't necessarily be as technical as Mr. Chabi's yesterday, so it will be easier to follow.
We hope so. We certainly hope so. But basically, you know, most of the people who are coming in are just going to be talking about their involvement and the evidence that they came across and the information that they came across that basically led to the irregularities that we saw within Transnet.
So we got about, what, 5 or 6 more people to come and testify with regards to Transnet-related testimony. But over the past couple of weeks, what sort of picture has been painted with regards to Transnet?
Okay, so we've had Transnet employees coming in, and they've painted a picture. I think the one thing that really stands out for me, the testimony that really stands out for me, is the testimony of board chairperson Popo Molefe, and I think I've said this many a times, that he talked about how the state capture project was basically orchestrated by people within. So he says that people within Transnet were captured and they were working in the interest of external entities. And he talks about how Transnet structures and governance were weakened, and you have someone else also attesting to how governance was weakened in the interest of siphoning money out of Transnet. And obviously this money is being siphoned out by means of acquisitions and cost escalations and unreasonable, unjustifiable cost escalations. And, you know, we've also heard, who else? We've also heard Francis Callard talking about how he doesn't find any reasonable or justifiable reason for the increases because he was the person who'd originally written the business case and motivated for the acquisition of 100 locomotives and a few others. But you generally get the sense that, you know, people were unhappy with how certain individuals inside were basically weakening governance in the interest of siphoning money out of Transnet. And that's the picture you've basically gotten, even though the testimonies are very similar because they are dealing with just, you know, one particular transaction. You know, each person paints a different picture. Each person, you know, adds something, you know, a different piece to the puzzle. Yeah,
extremely interesting viewing. Thank you very much indeed for your time. We'll let you get out of here at the studio. It's 9:38. You've got about 20 minutes to get to Parktown, so hurry up. Thank you very much indeed. That was Mbalenhle Mtetwa covering the state capture inquiry. It will resume today at 10 o'clock, so we look forward to Mbali's reporting a little later on. I just want to remind you about